I guess we all get to the place in life where we look at people and say, why don't they change? Why do they keep living like that? We see the boss who manages his business by fear. The people that work with him are afraid they're not going to get a paycheck one week or that they'll all be fired the next week. But he keeps on with fear. There are marriages built like that. Marriages where one is afraid to speak a wrong word or something bad will happen. Even the children are afraid of either daddy or mother. There are parents that provoke their children, and Paul said directly, don't provoke your children to anger. Be patient. Treat them like people. That was his word. Some people have such a negative attitude that you're afraid to talk with them. It's like being blindfolded and trying to walk around eggs on a floor. You're going to step on one of them. Because if you say the wrong word, it'll set them off. And it's like Hiroshima all over again. And there you are, right in the middle of it. Some kids in school just get by. They don't really care about making grades or learning. They just want to get out. And you wonder, why do they spend their time at all like that? I can give you the answer to that. If something is working for a person, they don't change. And they can say, well, we argue all the time in our marriage, but we're still married and it's been 44 years. You know, this is what I'm talking about. And the kids say, well, I make enough to pass. I just want to get out of this school and that's it. And the boss says, so I scare them to death. I'm still making money. And people say, as long as it works, I'll do it. Why fix it if it's working for me? I know that habit. I'll give you the perfect example that I know personally. I know a young man who about the age of 40 decided he wouldn't work anymore. It's just that simple. And so at times I get to see the family and they say to me, is there anything we could do to make him work? And I say, why does he need to? You feed him, you clothe him, you put a roof over his head, he has it made. It's working for him. Now, if it didn't work, he may change, but he's got it made. That's the way people are. If it works for me, I don't care if it's embarrassing, I'll keep doing it. Well, now, Proverbs has an interesting verse in it. Chapter 14, verse 12, it says, there is a way that seems right to man, but in its end, it leads to death. So you keep on with your family like that and it dies. You keep on with your business like that and it dies. You keep on with your school like that and it fails. You keep on with the attitude of always blowing up and you'll soon won't have friends. You keep provoking your children and pretty soon there's no closeness to them at all. That's what it said. It seems right, you're getting by with it, but it leads to the death of whatever you're doing. Well now, this worked for Jacob. Jacob was a deceiver. He always dealt off the bottom of the deck. He hurt people when he needed to. He lied when he had to. But he was getting by. He was doing all right. And why should he change? If he's a deceiver and it works, keep deceiving. Keep doing it. Look how he cheated his brother. His brother came in half dead from hunting one time, and instead of being a real brother to him in love and saying, let me feed you something, he said, if you give me your birthright, I'll give you some food. That's simple. Took it right from him. That meant he was no longer head of the house or would inherit a lot. he stole the blessing from him. Now this is one of the sad stories in the Old Testament. His dad was old and dying and blind, and he deceived him. Well, the mother helped. By the way, when you're telling people read the Bible and find out how your home should be, don't read the part here. This doesn't work. So here's what happened. Rebecca, the mother, said, I heard your dad say he was going to give the blessing to your brother Esau. And he sent him out hunting. And after he will eat the food, the savory food, then he'll bless him. But I want you, son, to have the blessing. Jacob was the favored child in the family. He wasn't the firstborn. He shouldn't have been. But here's what happened. So Jacob was smart enough to say, well, he's going to know I'm not Esau. Oh, she said, we're going to put Esau's clothes on you, and it will smell like you're a hunter. You can imagine that. He's been out hunting. There's no doubt about the clothes. He said, but I am a smooth man, and Esau is a hairy man. Esau had the muscles, and Jacob sort of had the cunning. And the mother said, well, look, you're going to kill me 2 kids, and I'm going to fix it like Esau would have. And we're going to put some of that hair on your hands. And so his father said, when he came in, he said, well, you don't sound like Esau. And Jacob said, oh, I'm Esau. And he said, here's some food so you can bless me. And he said, come close to me. The old man was near death, but he wasn't dumb. And he said, oh, I smell the clothing. You are Esau. But how did you get this so quick? Now here, Jacob actually blasphemes. He said, the Lord your God was gracious to me and gave me the thing in a hurry, gave me the gain. He lied to his dying father. Now that's a piece of work, isn't it? A man like Jacob, but he kept working. But now Jacob has been gone 20 years, and he's coming back, and he hears that Esau, who said, I'll kill him when I get a chance, especially after Dad dies, I'll kill him. Well, Dad could have died any moment, so he didn't know if he was dead or not yet. So here he's coming with 400 strong men. And Jacob had run out of road. There wasn't anywhere else to go. He'd used every trick he knew, and here was one he wasn't going to get out of. It's a good place to change when your road ends and there isn't anywhere to go. Like Naaman, you remember the great commander that I preached on several weeks ago, had leprosy. He tried all the doctors and there wasn't anywhere else except the prophet of God whom God could heal him through. He'd run out of road. There was no place to go. So Jacob has run out of road, and this is a good place to start changing. And you know, he begins to change. He's headed home, but he has to go and meet Esau first, very soon. Now listen to what he says in 32:10. Jacob starts praying. That's what we usually do when we run out of space. And that's good. And God isn't the kind that says, I told you so. When you pray, he welcomes you. He's a waiting father. Story of the prodigal son. Listen to what Jacob prays. I am unworthy of all the kindness and faithfulness you have shown your servant. Save me, I pray, from the hand of my brother Esau, for I am afraid he will come and attack me and also kill the mothers and their children. He is powerful enough to kill our entire family, and I need help. Old habits die hard, though, and Jacob was going to try one more flim-flam. He wasn't quite out of it. He decided maybe he could buy his brother off. Listen what he gave him as a little gift. Listen to this. I'm just doing some of them. 220 goats, 30 camels, 40 cows, 10 bulls, 30 donkeys. And he said to his men, now I want you to keep a big space between each of these animals. And when you come up to Esau, and he asks you, what is all this about? He'll say, your servant Jacob has sent this to you as a gift. He thinks maybe he won't kill me if I give him so much. And he did. Well, he sent his family across the river, and at night, he was alone. That was a very important word there. There was no one around except God. And think of the memories he had. 20 years ago, he had cheated his blind father, lied to him, and lied even about God. He had taken all that was worthwhile from his brother Esau. He had left a trail of broken people where he had come out good and they had not. And that'll get on a man's mind and heart. And at night when you're alone and the strange sounds are there and there's nothing to be seen except the bad dreams you've had of what you've done, that's when things start changing. And this is what he was thinking about. Now, a man came. He later says it was God in human form. That's what Jacob said. And he wrestled with him. And God must have taken some of his power away because he wanted to see what Jacob would do. And they wrestled and wrestled. And Jacob had maybe not grown any hair. He was still a smooth man. But from working with all the cattle and all, he now had muscles. And he prevailed. The first time in his life, physically, he's ever prevailed. And he hangs on. And he's winning. And the man touches his hip, knocks it out of joint. And he doesn't quit. Now this is sometimes what you need when you're coming to God. When you're at the very bottom, when you're at the end of the dead-end street and there's no turnaround, sometimes you really need to struggle with God because that's exactly how you feel. If God doesn't help me, there's not going to be any help. And he hung on after the man had crippled him some. Finally, the man said, you've got to let me go. It's getting light. I must be gone. And he said, I'm not going to let you go unless you bless me. That was his last hope. And he blessed him. He said, what's your name? He said, I'm a flim-flam man. I'm a deceiver. That's exactly what the Hebrew means. He said, you're not going to be that anymore. You're going to be Israel. It's going to be Israel, the one who strived with God. The one who really wanted God. And by the way, when it says the sons of Israel in the Bible, it's the sons of this man, Jacob, his 12 sons. He's now Israel. They're the sons of Jacob, of Israel. And sometimes we miss that when we're reading it. Well, the day came, and it was time to go face Esau. So Jacob, being the man he was, sent his wife and children ahead. You know, no partiality, women and children to the front, Jacob to the back. But then he went in front of them, and look how he came to meet Esau. He was bowing. 7 times he was bowing. I guess he thought he was going to get hit over the head. He didn't want to see it. 7 times he bowed, And Esau, you see what happened? Suddenly it changed. Esau ran and embraced him and wept. Who does that remind you of? The prodigal son's father. Did the same thing exactly. This is it in the Old Testament. It's his brother. And he wept and he kissed Jacob, and they both cried and held each other. Because you see, Esau had found God too and been blessed and had plenty. And then he looked up and he said, what is all this? All these droves of animals. Now, Jacob is becoming honest. He's just seen God. And he said, to find favor in your eyes, I've done this. Probably the first time in his life he was ever honest with a human being. He'd been honest with God, but not with human beings. And Esau said, look, I have plenty. You keep it. See all I have? And Jacob said to him, I want you to have it, for to see your face is like to seeing the face of God. He had just seen it the night before. See? Now, you say, how do you look like God? You're loving, you're kind, you care, you smile, you let them know that they're worth something. They see the face of God when they see that. That's what he said. I didn't expect you to be like this. You're like God. The face of God, I've seen it. And then Esau says, look, I can travel along with you now. I can give you protection if you want. And Jacob said, no, we'll meet later, but thank you. And thank you for sparing my life. It really came out. A new relationship. You see, things can change. Marriages can change. I had a couple come to me in Virginia, and they couldn't even talk to each other. I had to tell her what he was saying, and I had to tell him what she was saying, because they really disliked each other so much they couldn't even hear what they said. You know that. When you get to disliking a person sometimes, they can't even walk right. You know that. Well, that's the way they were. I gave them some homework to do, and I was thinking, man, I have hit one I'm not going to be able to help that much. Gave them some homework, and they came back with a smile. And I did a thing that I had learned in study. I said to them, now this doesn't sound very scriptural, but God uses a lot of things. Old mean kings and Jacob, and you know. So whatever works, I was desperate. So I said to him, I want you to tell me your favorite hero in fiction. Who is a favorite to you? Well, the next day, she said, the next time she came, I can tell you my favorite, it's Peter Pan. She said because he always stayed a child and he always flew away when there was trouble. And I've been doing that in my marriage our whole life. I've been acting like a child, and anytime something came up I didn't like, I was out of there. And he started talking to her, and she started talking to him, and they talked with love and said, well, you didn't hear what I said? Let me say it again, honey. And I just sat back and watched them talk and watched them come together. And the Lord healed it, and they came back one more time and said, we've got it. We know what it is. And thank you. And we had prayer, and they left. And the last I heard, they're still happy together. When I was in junior college, boy, did I have a time. I was raised in a church that's just filled with love and love for Christ and witnessing. And I was running all over the campus saying, Jesus is the answer. And I believed it. But I hadn't heard all the questions. And one day this professor, who happened to be an atheist, and we remained friends, by the way. But anyway, he said, stand up, Mr. Penner. And here I stood up in college, 18 years old, knew everything, read my Bible, witnessed. He said, Mr. Penner, they're having a labor dispute in West Virginia. The coal miners, John L. Lewis is there. There's been death. Tell me how Christ is the answer to that. Oh boy, well, I'd never heard anything like that in my life. Our church didn't preach that way. It was just get out and win them. But I didn't know the answer. My life changed that day, by the way. It really did. That's partly why I'm who I am today. But I went to the professor of Baptist minister, had a degree in philosophy and theology, knew his Bible, godly man. I said, he took me apart and didn't put me back together. What in the world is the answer? And he said, well, Tom, in his Scottish accent, Tom, if management loved labor with the love of Christ and labor loved management with the love of Christ, they'd work something out. They would get something fair for both instead of each trying to do the other one. Well, that was right. And then I can see when bosses come to their people and say, I care, then I'm real interested in that, and the workers change when they know they're changing. Parents can change. They did a work, they tried to bring back an area in Harlem, and they had churches, they had the police, they had everybody working on it, had any part in it. And this one mother came and told what happened to her. She said, they came by to help me, and the only thing I knew to do with my children was just beat them up when they were bad. When I was young, I got beat up when I didn't know it. I just beat them up all the time. And she said, they taught me how I could discipline them without beating them all the time, and our home is different now. You see, things change when God comes in and God's people come in. I have a friend who was really a wiseacre in high school. He kept the class laughing all the time. The teacher said one day, I remember a great event in my life that I got to attend, and he shouted out the Boston Tea Party, which would make her about 150 years old. Everybody thought that was funny. Well, he found the Lord later and moved to the front of the classroom, started making the honor roll. And he later became the chairman of the Department of Religion at San Diego State. God takes some interesting people and does stuff with them. And this is what I'm saying. There are ways that this can change when you come to the end of your road and say, isn't there any other way? Let me ask you, have you come to the end of your road in your marriage, in your work, in 100 things, and you really don't see any way out? This is a good place to find God. In the New Testament, Christ says, blessed are they who hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. There was a pastor in Africa, and one of his members came and said, I really want to know God. I just want to know him. And he said, come out in the water with me. And he thought maybe he was going to baptize me. And when they got out there, he pushed him under the water and held him. And the man struggled and kicked and struggled and kicked. Finally, he let him up. The man took a breath and he said, why do you want to do that? And he said, what did you want the most when you were under the water? Air, he said, air. I wanted to breathe. He said, when you love God that much, when you hunger and thirst after him, you'll find him for sure. And that's right. Sometimes God's too casual to us. Well, we can take him, leave him, so what? But this man didn't. He knew he would die if he didn't find him, and he knew his future would be over. And here we are. Have you run out of space today? Run out of road? Run out of excuses? This is a great time to find God. And like the prodigal son's father, when he came home, he didn't say, I told you if you took that money and went to that far land, this is what would happen to you. Man, he didn't say that. He'd hardly let the boy talk. He grabbed him and said, he's back, let's have a party. And this is the way God looks at you. It's not, well, if you get, it's, I'm waiting, you just haven't seen it yet. But if you're through trying with the way that leads to death, how about trying me? And let me take your life and make it what it was to be. Your sins forgiven, and a new Lord in your life, and a new path to walk. We're going to have an invitation hymn. It's to invite you. It really is. It's to invite you to the God who deals with Jacob, who becomes one of the great fathers of Israel. You can't say, I'm so far gone, God can't use me. He was as far gone as any man I've ever known in the way he lived. But God used him. I want you to come and start a new life. If you haven't, God is waiting. Now, he promised he'd be here where just 2 or 3 are gathered. He's here. And he waits for you. Some of you need a church home. You need to be part of a family of God like this one here. I invite you to come. Whatever God has called you to be, I want you to come down. Christ died openly, outwardly, where everybody was passing by. You can make this decision in the midst of friends, not enemies. So as we sing, as God has called you, you come, and I and others will be at the front to meet you and welcome.